Welcome to Scaling with Heart, the show where growth meets humanity. I'm your host, Nikki Duncan, and I sit down with operators, founders, and change makers who are building smarter systems, stronger teams, and more intentional lives. Whether you're growing a business, leading a team, or leveling up your own work, this is your space to learn how strategy, creativity, and heart come together to scale what matters. We'll explore the tools, mindset shifts, and leadership habits that turn complexity into clarity and ambition into aligned action. Let's get into it. Today's guest is Dr. Brenda L. Carter, a PhD business psychologist and enterprise talent strategist who architects people systems at scale. She's led large scale change, succession governance, and people analytics across companies like PepsiCo and Emerson, delivering measurable impact, including a 45-time ROI leadership initiative and protecting key talent during an $8 billion acquisition. Today, we're discussing her inner authority method, the 7 pillars that help leaders do the inner work, read the room, and build influence in the micro moments that matter most.
You hear a lot of speakers and they're very motivational, and there's nothing wrong with motivation, but I am the what can I use Monday morning type of girl,
Right.
so
Right. And I love that. And one of the things that really stood out to me, I mean, like I said, I've heard you speak 3 or 4 times now, and it's always been a little bit different.
Mhm.
And I like how you talk about how to influence and how to use the art of influence in what we do and how we lead and how we talk about ourselves and position ourselves. And I really enjoyed your inner authority method and your 7 pillars of that.
Yeah.
So I would really love it if we could talk about that and what your 7 pillars are and how they lean into how we show up as
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah. So first and foremost, the art of influence. It was so funny because I was talking to a really good friend one day, and we were like, I don't know, we were just really thinking about what really sums up even myself concerning gifting. And it's like it came to us both at the same time, and it was dealing with influence. And as I started thinking about the different giftings that God had put in me, it was like, yeah, there's an art to it. And I think I've been that person that has floundered a lot in when it comes to influence. And so I created the art of influence to kind of give some more insight so that way we're not floundering anymore. Because I know what it's like to feel like you're in the dark. And it is a really not great feeling, let's just say. It doesn't feel good. And so my goal was to help. And so then as I started thinking, I was like, well, what are the components that help to drive influence? And that's when I came up with the 7 pillars. But the reason why I called it the inner authority method is because I realized that even within myself, my influence and my ability to influence didn't expand until I got very clear from within and I started walking in authority of myself from within, right? Very wise saying, as a man thinks, so is he. And so fixing the way that I saw myself, the way I thought, I had went through just a little background about me. I went through a very, very traumatic childhood, suffered from a heavy amount of physical and mental abuse, lots of neglect. And so all of those things formed this narrative within me that was driving me to show up a certain way. Sometimes it would cause me to shrink, or hide or mislabel myself, right? And that was all because there were triggers that were going off, right? That tied back to childhood. So a really great one in one of my earlier keynotes that I gave was, feeling like if I was visible, I would become a target because growing up, when someone complimented me or if I did something well, it's like I became targeted even that much more. So it was safer for me to shrink. Well, the problem is that as you get older, you don't grow out of that behavior because it's embedded, it's learned. And so now when you need to show up as leader or just even as yourself, right? Or as wife or as mom, you have these extra influences that aren't actually you.
Mhm.
It's what was put into you from your experiences. And so when I sat down and I thought about the journey that I went through, just to get very comfortable with who I am and how God made me, not how my environment tried to tell me who I was, I realized that there was a lot of nuances and I couldn't just ball them up into one. And so that's why I had created seven. And so the seven are anchoring, and then it's observe, and then it's intrigue, and then it's strategize, and then it's curate, and then it's illuminate and empower. And so every last one of them um, have their own focus. So, like for example, anchoring, that's really about the practice of really grounding yourself in who you are and your purpose before you go anywhere, right? Like
Right.
this is the core. Even when I'm talking about interviewing or different things, right? When we're talking about external influence, you have to be anchored in what the context of the room is, but you also have to be anchored. You have to anchor that to your gifting,
Right.
right? You're not shape shifting to every situation and every role or every opportunity or every event. You're being very targeted about who you are and how you show up, but you're also making sure you're aligned with the room. The next one was like observing, right? So it's the art and the discipline of really reading the room. Sometimes, we get nervous and we walk into a room and we're just going off of like our energy or the dynamics of the room. Like if you have a personality, let's just say that triggers you, you'll allow that personality to kind of like catch you off guard.
Mhm.
But when you're observing, you are actually self-governing because you're being able to pick up, okay, who's in the room? How am I going to respond? What triggers are there? Or what does the room need? And that allows you to even that much more better influence and show up very strategically in who you are authentically.
Right.
The next one is intrigue. And so the intrigue, it's the art of sparking curiosity, right? And making sure that you're strategically guiding attention. So, like when you think about intrigue, it's not like just data dumping or just blurting everything out, right? And we've seen that before. But it's about like being selective about what you share and, how you share it. And then you have strategize. So strategize is speaking with timing, clarity, and purpose, right? And so sometimes you might strategically speak, but then other times you might strategically be quiet because your silence can be just as powerful about in terms of what you say. Sorry. The next one is curating, right? And so curating is about the intentional practice of selecting and amplifying which strengths you share that are going to best serve the moment, right? Because we don't have to tell everything. And yeah, you have some stories that might wow, but what about those stories that really impact? When you start curating and selecting those stories that have a greater impact or the most impact on the conversation, that's how you begin to build influence. Then we have eliminate. I'm sorry, illuminate. And so illuminating is basically reframing your self-perception. So I always like to use in my talks, I always use this thing. It looks like a rock. And I ask most people, like, if you saw this in your backyard, what would you do? And a lot of them like want to throw it out. But then when I switch to the next slide and they see that there is a 24 karat gold nugget And that was what was inside the rock. And for many of us, self most definitely, we get encumbered by these rocks, these hard situations, these tough environments that cover the gold that we really have and that we really are. And then what we do is we start describing ourselves as rock rather than as gold. And usually you have to go through a refinement state in order to begin to shed that rock and illuminate the gold that you have even to yourself. The one of the last pillars that I have is empower. And so that is the practice of meeting people where they are and you helping them to move into who they are becoming. It's not about you controlling, it is about you guiding, helping, and releasing. And so those are my seven pillars. And I've found that every last one of them, in some way, shape, or form, help with the art of influence. So,
Right. You know, it's listening to you talk about all of the seven pillars and touching on each one of them, especially the one where you were talking about how in the observe, when we're reading the room and considering what the room needs and how by doing that we are self-regulating. It made me it made me recall a time I was sitting at lunch and there were probably 8 of us at the table. And everybody was cutting up and telling jokes and stories about spouses and, whatever. You know how those conversations go, right?
yep.
And one gentleman was sitting there, and I don't even remember how the conversation went, but he made a comment about how his wife had recently passed away.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, everybody at the table, everybody grows quiet for a minute because it was obviously hard for him and
yeah.
he was thinking about his moment. Everybody grows quiet and we're all giving him this space, to be human and vulnerable. And there's one person at the table that after about 5 seconds of silence goes, "Well, anyway, so there was this time," and
Right.
he tells this really, I mean, probably in other circumstances would not have been inappropriate. It wasn't really inappropriate in a gross sense, but it was just inappropriate for the moment.
Yeah,
This
ill-timed.
joke. And it was like, and I remember sitting there and I thought, I respected you
Yeah. Yeah.
until that moment. And
Yeah.
because you couldn't give him the grace
Yeah.
that he needed to be vulnerable and live with his moment,
Yeah.
um, it changed the way I viewed that person.
Which it means he lost influence.
Yes, and he did lose influence at least over me. I don't, and I just kept going, and we gave this guy the moment, and
Yeah.
and the other gentleman who was taking his moment, he kind of looked sideways, and and I you could kind of see he had a thought
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
But then he pulled himself out of his
Yeah.
grief and kind of started working back into the flow of the
Yeah.
funny conversation. But it was interesting because as I throughout the rest of the day I found myself thinking about each person at that table
Mm-hmm.
and how each person responded
Yeah.
in that moment. And here we
Yeah.
have somebody sitting with something really heavy
Yeah.
and you're making a joke out of it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a joking moment.
Moment. Yeah. And
Um,
that's the thing about what I learned, why it's important for the to do the inner work, the inner
mhm,
authority. Because the guy that made the joke, I would be very interested to know if for him growing up, if that's how they handled tough
right.
situations. So now he's showing up in a way that now destroys or ruptures in
Hmm.
some way, shape, or form, right? His influence when it's like, no, that's tied to something even he's dealing with, but he doesn't know how to sit in uncomfortability for a long
Right.
time,
Right.
right? But now it shows up in this system, in this situation that is really detrimental, right?
Mhm.
And so that's why I came up with this method because you have to be able to do the work so that you're not losing influence in these micro moments.
Right. And doing that work, because even if all of us bring some kind of baggage and trauma with us, it's all different levels. Some of it's obviously way worse than other people's and whatever. Um, and doing that work is hard. And I had somebody on the podcast, a lady on the podcast a month or two ago, and she is a doctor and she does brain-based, body-based, brain and body-based therapies, right? Where she works with implicit memory
Hmm.
and using things like, what is it, EMDR,
Yes,
the
EMDR.
rapid,
I had to do that too.
the eye
Hmm.
movement. She does that, and she does brain spotting and neurofeedback and stuff like that. And, to work with implicit memory to help people get past the roadblocks that are
Yes.
stopping them from being able to process, even if they
Yeah.
can't fully process and talk about their trauma,
Yeah.
they can at least process that there is a trauma
Yeah.
and this behavior is coming from this trauma, and this is how we move past
Yes.
that
Yes.
trauma. And it is
Yes.
so interesting to me
Mhm.
how all of this work is done and works. And it really, when you start paying attention to it, it really changes the way you view other people. And like you're saying with that gentleman who was making the joke, what
Mhm.
in your life made that your normal behavior
Yeah.
and okay behavior?
Yeah. And like what I've found, because we normally talk about how these traumatic things like show up personally, like,
Mhm.
oh, my marriage, my kids, or whatever. But what I found is it shows up in our leadership behavior. And so a lot of the things that we see, even in our leaders and even in the politics and all of the things, a lot of it is being fed off of these experiences and these bad behaviors that are showing up. Like for me, I had to do the EMDR, right? Because everything that I went through was so traumatic. But what I did not know was that, hey, this is showing up in how you show up at work, right? Certain personality types can be a trigger for you. You
Right.
need to know that, right? Until we can get healed to a point where it's no longer translated like that to me.
Right.
Or like, certain events, right? Like if you have a fear of failure, now there's the perfectionism that comes in, right? And so certain things you have to cross every T and dot every I, and it can get you to a point of burnout, right? Those are work
Mhm.
behaviors. Or you have situations where you might find yourself becoming like overly emotional or shutting down, right? Or
Yeah.
you are afraid to go for the promotion. It's a whole bunch of stuff that shows up, and it can even show up in how certain leaders feel threatened when someone might be outperforming them, right? And so
Mhm.
you stifle them, but you don't realize that maybe you grew up in a household where you were pitted against your siblings,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And if everything you did was harshly judged, in your mind, you feel like you got to be so far above everyone else in order for you to feel safe.
Yeah.
And so when someone comes with, you know, skill, talent, ability, everything in you says danger. And so now that person is the enemy. And now you're seeing a trigger of, we see the fight, flight,
Mhm.
fawn, freeze. Those situations manifest at work as well,
Yeah.
right? But we make concessions for them within the corporate culture, depending on if that person has gotten to a certain level of, you know, rank, status, influence, all of the things.
Right.
But all of this shows up in the workplace in how we manage and in how we lead.
Yeah. And it's, my family deals with things with sarcasm. I'm not really
Mm-hmm.
sure where it came from. It's
Mm-hmm.
just what we do. We are
Mm-hmm.
a sarcastic bunch of
Yep.
people.
So is mine.
And when we get together, I mean, the sarcasm is flying left and right.
Yes.
And
Yep.
when my youngest daughter brought around, who is now my son-in-law, when he first came around, he is like, "You are an angry group of people." And I'm like, "We're not mad."
We're not
He
mad. We're just
always thought I
sarcastic.
was mad. I'm like, "I'm not mad. You will know
Right.
when I
Right.
am mad. Trust me,
Yeah.
there's no in between."
Yep.
But he didn't know because his parents were not sarcastic. And
Ah.
so he didn't know how to function in that loud, large, sarcastic
Yep.
group. And my nephew's wife, she didn't know how to function in
Yeah.
the large, loud, sarcastic group. And,
Yep.
every time we used to say anything, we would make her cry.
No.
And it was
Wow.
like, oh my gosh, we
Really?
didn't, that's not what that was. That's not what we did.
Right.
That's not how
Right.
we intended for that to land.
Yeah.
And so, you know, she says all the time, she's like, well, I had to learn how to deal with that. And I
Yeah.
had to learn how to live with you guys.
Yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, she had to learn how to live with us because she was married into the family. She's going to be here for the long haul. But we
Hmm.
had to learn to live with her too.
Yeah.
And
It's
the
not one way
same thing
street.
with my son-in-law, he didn't take, there are just things he doesn't take well.
Yeah.
And I had to learn that. So there's always this part of me, and you talk about observing and self-regulating and curating which part
Yeah.
to use when. And
Yes.
there are times that, if I read the room and read his face or his body and his tension, like it all shows up on him.
Yeah.
And so I can observe him, and now I know him better, and I know
Yeah.
some of what he's come from and
Yeah.
why he's that way, even if he can't process
Right. Right.
why he is the way he is and why he reacts to things the way he reacts to them.
Yeah.
He can't necessarily process it. And I don't know all of it, but I know enough to say, you know what, I can't tell a joke in this moment.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
can't I can't be real forward driving with my opinion right now. I need to soften that up a little bit.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are
Yep.
some people that I can say, well, that's just ridiculously stupid.
Yep. And then others, you gotta
And
put a
then
lot of
others,
sugar in
it's like, are you
it.
really sure I
Yeah.
don't know
That's
if
the
that's
best.
the best approach, like you got to really soften it up.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. It takes it, but and it's a muscle,
Yep.
right? But it's a muscle we technically all come with. And the reason why we know this is because it's like the word being authentic, right? There are different versions of you that is still authentic. So how you talk to your boss is different than how you talk to your grandmother. How you talk to your grandmother is different than how you talk to your husband. How you talk to your husband is different than how you talk to your kids. They're all you, but they're different versions of that authentic you.
Right.
Right. So it's like, but when you're meeting new people, now you got to learn another version of how to interact with that
Uh-huh.
person until they are emotionally stable enough, right,
Yes.
to handle that portion of you. And some
Yes.
people may never be emotionally stable, and it's not for you to necessarily carry, right?
Mhm.
You don't have to carry the emotional load for them.
Right.
It's just like a pivot point where you're like, oh, this person's in the room. Okay, I know what that means. Or sometimes you can give a disclaimer, right? Self advocacy
Yeah.
to say, hey, just the FYI, I am like on one today. And so I'm feeling really sarcastic. So if you hear me say something, don't take it to heart.
Right.
I'm just in one of those modes.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm not directing anything at you. I'm just mainly talking to this person, this person, this person.
Yep.
Like you don't have to lose your voice
Hmm.
when you observe someone and you're making a pivot because of their sensitivity.
Yeah.
You can still have voice. And I think that that's the thing that can make it feel hard because then we feel like we're being stripped of who we are and we're being
Mhm.
stripped of voice.
Yeah.
And no, you don't have to be stripped of voice. You could still give the disclaimer, you might soften it, but you still said what you needed to say.
Right. I had so many people in my last job. I worked with business owners, and some days were just when you own a business, some days are just more stressful than others.
Mhm.
It just is what it is. You've got your staff, you've got your customers, you've got the demands of business, you've got all these things. And some days things are breaking left and right. And I had a lot of the franchisees, business owners, got to the point they knew me so well that they would just pick up the phone and say, "Can I vent?"
Yep.
Yep. I'm like, or Nikki, I need help. Okay. Do you need answers or do you
Right.
just need me to listen? Like, what do you want
Yep.
from me?
Yep.
And we would set the tone of, am I listening
Yes.
or am I going to try to fix?
Yes. Yes.
It's like, it's kind of like asking somebody, how do I look in this outfit? Okay. Do you want me to
Right.
be honest or
Right.
do you want me to
Or
tell you what you want to hear?
yeah.
Um, and we talked about the sarcasm. My daughter was trying on hand-me-down dresses one time and she put one on and she says, "What do you think?" And I said, "Do you want me to be honest? Or do you want
That's
me to
the
tell you what I
answer.
think you want to say?" She
That's the answer right
says,
there.
"I want you to be honest." And I sat there and I went, oompa loompa loompa.
Do, 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 do. Yes.
Right there in the living room. She's just like, "Nope," and just rips it off. Not wearing that dress. Forget it.
I'll never wear it again.
She never ever touched that dress again except to put it in the discard pile.
Yeah.
Um, you
Now it
know,
has a theme track on it.
right,
You put a
I
theme
know. She
song
was like, I
to the
can't do
dress.
it. But I had so many people who would come to me and say, "I need to unload."
Yeah.
Okay, unload. And I would even have them ask me, what are the restrictions on the language I can use while I unload?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you're unloading to me, not because of me.
Yeah.
So, you
Yeah.
know, go whatever, and I won't take it personal. And it's that
Yeah.
disclaimer that you're talking about.
Mhm.
I'm having a bad one. I'm on a tear.
Yep.
My husband will come home and go, "How was your day?" And I go, "It was a day." Or "It was a
Mhm.
day." The tone of
Mhm.
voice tells him, and if I'm
Oh, it
like,
matters.
"It was a day," he's like, "Okay, so
Mhm.
we all need to stay out of your way today." Yeah,
Mhm.
that's probably
Yeah.
wise. Or
Yep.
whatever. But I think that's part of the strategizing and the self-regulating
Mhm.
and the curating. They all seem to tie so closely together.
Yeah. Yep. They
They
go
truly
hand
can.
in hand.
Yeah.
Really do go hand in hand, But when it doesn't feel like a loss and it doesn't feel like a heavy load when you know your center and your core, your strengths, your weaknesses, your stuff that you're working on. It then helps you to go in and to give grace to others. It helps you to be able to observe because you got to remember that while someone, like you're experiencing someone, someone is experiencing you.
Right.
Right. And think about how you felt at times where you've experienced someone that triggered you and it wasn't your style. It wasn't. And
Hmm.
so that's one of the things that I always try to get my leaders to understand, but in a very safe way, right? Like when I had to do a keynote, I had to host a class at SMU, and we were talking about conflict, specifically at the executive level. And I had created like all of these archetypes, and there's pluses and minuses to them. But the goal was to not just see the other person, but to also see yourself.
Right.
Because we always like to put the bad behavior on someone else. And it's like, but nothing changes when we
Hmm.
keep making the monster out there.
Right.
Let's look at how I contribute to. these types of behaviors or this type of culture or, you know, the nature of my home or my friendships or whatever, right? And we can't always hit the victim card. And it doesn't mean, well, because I can't hit the victim card, I'm automatically the villain,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's you're human, but as the complexity gets bigger, yeah, you can start to look a little more like a villain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's always one common denominator
Mhm.
in our experiences. And that's one of the lessons I tried to teach, my girls. There's one common denominator, and there's one thing that you can control in every situation and circumstances. There's only
Yeah,
one, and
yeah,
that's you.
yep.
And trying to get that control is so tricky. And I know, and it plays into the inner authority method, and it really goes into the anchoring that you
Mhm.
talk about, and knowing who you are. And we don't have to reinvent ourselves. We have to be clear on who we are. And I know you've talked about it, the few times I've heard you speak. And it's so funny because every time you talk about it, I think I do that same thing, but in a different way.
Mhm.
You talk about how you open up your Otter AI and you just dictate your story to
Mhm.
Otter AI. And I
Mhm.
opened up a Word document. I'm a writer. I write.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
opened up a Word document and I just started out and just
Yep.
wrote my story because what I was trying to find out was I know who I am as a person, but I
Mhm.
wanted to know who I am professionally
Yep.
and how that plays into, how do the two how do the two blend? And there are so many parts of me. There are so many parts to all of us.
Yep.
I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I live in the country and I have horses, so I'm an animal person. I am a homekeeper. I am a cook, a
Yes.
writer, a chief of
Yeah.
staff, an operational person. I do, all of these things. And so it can be so overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
to identify that one
Yep.
through line.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I call it my career story that I
Mm-hmm.
write. And I've heard you talk about that
Mm-hmm.
and how from there you can even start to use AI to help it pull out
Yes. Yes.
who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Because so as an IO psychologist, I always had to do like heavy amounts of research. And so that's how I learned about the Otter app.
Mhm.
Um, because you just get to talk. Now, thing with me is my brain moves super fast, faster than my hands. And when my hands start to type, I start getting too technical because now I'm like trying to make sure that it's grammatically and structured and all of the things, right? And so because my brain goes so fast, I have to speak it because I'm a speaker, right?
Right.
Um, and so what I had learned was that it was a really great way of me just kind of like getting every squirrel out of my head. Right. When I was at work, I would always say like, hey, the squirrels are loose right now because I
Mhm.
have like multiple ideas and creations and all this stuff going on in my head. So I get to let the squirrels out and AI cannot get exhausted and be like, girl, shut up. That's what I love about it. I just get to go. Right.
Mhm.
And as an IO psychologist, I often myself, I'll look at like leadership assessments. I'll mix the quantitative and the qualitative to see what the story is, what's coming out. I was trained in what is that, Hogan's, right? So with Hogan's, they have the good leadership profile versus your bad versus your values. It gets really technical, but it helps to flesh out what are the things that make you a great leader and that make you unique, but also what are your derailers? And I've realized that also qualitatively, when I get to tell the story and I get to just dump it, and I can tell all facets of it. I could tell my fears, I could tell the response, I could tell if somebody misunderstood or if it connected well, I could tell the wins, I could tell everything. And then when I go to upload it into chat, I can now use different prompts to help me see what I couldn't see. So this is why the illumination pillar is so important, because there are oftentimes, it's like bad breath. You don't know that you have bad breath until you see somebody's reaction and they go like this, and you're like, oh, right? Yeah. So it's your way of being able to successfully do the breath check,
Right.
right? And you can say, hey, be brutally honest, or be honest, but don't break my heart, right?
Right.
You can put it in the prompt. And please don't overly coddle me, because I'm trying to understand something. And
Right.
so then it allows you to look at, okay, number one, what is my professional story? Because sometimes we are so broken down, and especially to some of the groups that I've spoken to, a lot of them are in job transition, right? And so with them being in job transition, they might feel like, man, I am so broken down. I'm so low. I got fired. I knew I should have did this right. Knew I shouldn't have did this. And you just start getting all of these really intrusive thoughts that can beat you back into rock form rather than the gold. And so by having those conversations and doing the dump, you're refining and bringing out the gold more. But in addition to that, you have to melt the rock. And so you have to get rid of old ways of thinking,
Mhm.
old ways of seeing yourself, right? Or even old coping mechanisms that were killing your ability to influence, right? And so what I found is, like, when I do the dump and I'm like, okay, where are my strengths and weaknesses as a leader? Where's my career story, right? What does it look like? Where, like, what's my halo effect, right? And how do I really own this a little bit more? Even in the way that I'm talking about myself, what are you picking up about how I look at myself that needs to change? And so when you do that, it illuminates so much, because you cannot change what you're not aware of,
Right.
right? You can't even amplify what you don't realize is a strength. You'll underutilize it, right?
Yeah.
Or you'll overly keep hitting those weaknesses buttons, and you're not realizing, hey, you're in a cycle. You actually keep doing the same thing and keep getting the same result, right? Nothing changes. And so that's why it's so important to do that dump, whether it's through writing or speaking or whatever, and then uploading it so that way you can get a different perspective of you.
Right. Right. It's hard work. It's scary work.
Absolutely.
Because, oh my gosh, I have to look at myself and I don't want to look at myself. And you're right, job seekers, people who are in transition, it's terrifying. And my husband is not in transition, but there are times when I will challenge a way of thinking or a way we've been doing thing. Well, we've always done it that way. Okay, just because it's always been that way
Doesn't mean it needs to stay that way.
doesn't mean it needs to stay that way. And maybe it shouldn't stay that way.
Hmm.
And it's so hard for people to break out
Yeah.
of, but we've always done it this way. This is the way it's been. It's hard to break out of that. And it's terrifying, but it can be so freeing
Yes.
at the
Yes.
same time if you break out of it. And sometimes it takes something really big
Yes. Yes.
to shake you out of it. I mean, for me, it took my job ending
Yeah.
to
Yep.
shake me up and say, okay, you've been doing this for this long. Now
Yep.
it's just time to start scratch. And I just kind of drew the line in the sand. This is the past me. This is the new me. And I just stepped over that line and said, moving forward,
This is how
this
I
is
operate.
this is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. This is what I'm going to focus on. And
Yeah.
all of that stuff in the past happened, and I'm not going to forget about it.
Yeah.
I'm
Let's
going to
roll.
use it to inform and help me identify where I need to shift and change.
Yeah. And that's like a lot of organizations, right? We're all like a
Yep.
mini organization. But when you think about like even the culture of an organization or leadership, it's the same as our personal experiences, right? If it isn't broke, why should I fix it? Well, usually there has to be something really big to let you know, no, this has been broke and it's gotten so bad because you've refused to address it for so long that now this can't go any further,
Right.
right? And so it's the same exact thing. And so, you know, you see a lot of like corporate cultures and leaders that are like, something has to change because we're losing customers or we're losing employees,
Mhm.
or, you know, the market share is diminishing, and this has changed and that has changed and all of that. And so it takes the work, right? But a lot of times we have resistors. Early in my career, I was a change manager, right? So
Mhm.
ProSci certified change practitioner, all of the things. And a lot of times you had resistance because of the simple fact that it's not just that it's new, but we don't know the day-to-day operating system of what's new. I know the day-to-day operating system of what's old.
Right.
Yes, it's broken, but at least I know it.
Mhm.
As opposed to this is not broken, but I don't know how this works,
Right.
right?
Yep.
And so there has to be ample resourcing and help and a collective critical mass of displaying of this is the new way we're operating. Let me display it. Let me show you, not tell you, let me show you,
Right.
you know. And when it becomes detrimental enough, it's amazing how change just automatically just comes right on up. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, I could do it. Right. Like if you are, let's just say you struggle with alcohol or eating bad food, but then you get that doctor's report that says you are at an inflection point.
Hmm.
And if you do not change this, you will go from having another 15 years to live to one.
Right.
That is startling. And every excuse that you once had all goes out of the window,
Right.
and your effort even changes.
Yeah. We had a customer one time, your comment about the doctor's note just
Hmm.
made me think of him. We had a customer one time, and when I was working in retail, man, he was the crankiest, most unfriendly individual. He was always grumpy. And we went for a couple weeks and we didn't see him for a couple weeks, and it was really weird. But he was one of those customers that when you saw him coming, everybody in the store was, "It's your turn, Brenda. I did it last time."
Yep.
Nobody wanted to
He's
wait
your
on,
client. He's your
your
customer.
turn, you're up, not
Yep.
me, those
You
guys.
got this.
And so the rest of us would go hide in the back room or whatever. And it was kind of like kids calling shotgun. Who can get there the fastest? It was who can get out of there the fastest, and slowest one loses, right?
Uh-huh.
But all of a sudden he came in after a couple of weeks of being gone, and he was very nice and he was cordial and he was just the sweetest guy.
Hmm.
And we were like,
What's going on?
something's weird.
Hmm.
And she worked in the store with us, and my mom is not one to beat around the bush.
Hmm.
And
This is where you get it from.
yeah, probably. And she looked at him and she says, "You're different. What's going on?" He says, "What do you mean?" She says, "You're being nice.
Right.
And that's not you. What's going on?" He says, "Well, I had a heart attack and died, and they
Oh,
brought me back." And you know what? It just was a pretty powerful reminder that I need to change things. It was just
yeah.
a powerful message that what I've been doing is the wrong way
Yeah.
and I need to change.
Yeah.
And it took a heart attack and death
Right.
for a few minutes
Yeah. Some of us are that hard-headed.
to to learn the lesson and be like, I can't keep going this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I every now and then he pops in my head, and I think about not wanting to be that hard-headed
Yeah.
that I have to, die and be resuscitated
Right.
um before I learn a lesson.
Yeah. Because
But
when you finally cross over to the other side, you realize how much time stubbornness will cost you.
yeah.
And it's not just like time. quantity wise, it's time quality wise
Yeah.
because it's so valuable.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yes, you can have all your excuses, but it's costing you time. Or for an organization, it's costing you market share, it's costing you employees, it's costing you performance.
Hmm.
Either way, it is costing you. But a lot of times, our stubbornness, we're trying to outrun the accounting of our decisions
Right.
to find out just how much has it cost us.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you know what? Sometimes it's as simple as saying, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And sometimes it takes a little more work.
Yeah, because sometimes you got to fix stuff that you broke.
Yeah, you do. And sometimes you have to admit that you can't fix what you broke.
Hmm.
I broke it. I did bad. I did wrong. All I can do is say I'm sorry and I'll do
And
better
change.
moving forward. And
Yeah,
I will change what I do moving forward. And sometimes that is all we can hope for. Um, and
especially as leaders,
yeah,
because as leaders, when you break something, it's not just confined to you.
nope. Hmm.
It impacts a bunch of other people. But to your point, you may not be able to repair what you did to the others. But
Hmm.
what you can do is number one, of course, don't do it again, but also undo the systems and the unspoken rules that you've created from your behaviors that have maybe given a green light for others to follow in that path,
Right.
right? And you're going to have to do that by example. You're going to have to do that by maybe actually going and saying, hey, when we go to give promotions, it's not, I'm not doing this, oh, well, we went out to lunch and da, da, da. No, we're going to do it based off of, we're going to look at, leadership characteristics, your performance, and this and this. And this is the new way that we're putting in place. Like when you are a leader, you have to now take the influence and the power you have and use it to build what is correct. You may not be able to repair what you broke, but you can use it to build what is correct and what is right.
Right. And I think that is such a powerful lesson. And in the interest of time, I think that's where we're going to end today. So, on that note, Dr. Brenda, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave anybody with?
I would just say, listen, the work of getting grounded in who you are, looking at the good, the bad, the ugly, and the in between, it's really a game changer. A lot of times we go through life and it feels mundane. But when you do this work, it begins to open up another view of life that you've never seen. And even as a leader, you build a lasting legacy. Instead of having casualties, you get to have wins. You get to have people that are like, oh my gosh, this person helped me. And that's the beauty of influence. Influence is not about status, it's not about prestige, it's about impact.
I
So
love that. Well, thank you so much for being here.
thank you
This
for
was
having me.
amazing. One of my
Absolutely.
favorites,
Thank you.
which was the
I enjoyed it.
running theme the last time you spoke for us. One of my favorites.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I always enjoy being able to get up and help because I know what it's like to be in confusion and then somebody says something and it's like the lights are on. Ha!
Yes, I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And where can, if people want to book you for speaking or
Yeah.
advising services, where can they connect with you the best?
Yes, they can connect with me at brb.artofinfluence@gmail.com.
Okay.
Yeah. And so there I do coaching, I do speaking, and then from an organizational standpoint, I am the person that you would call to be your head of talent management and talent planning and leadership development.
I love that. Super. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thanks for joining us on Scaling with Heart, where purpose fuels progress and people power possibility. If this episode brought you insight, inspiration, or a spark of strategy, share it with a fellow builder, leave a review, or spread the word. Until next time, keep showing up with clarity, courage, and compassion as you scale what matters most.